There's one ingredient or food type that is holding so many people back in their healing journey, that is preventing people from achieving their health goals. And it's something that has been marketed to be one of the key ingredients that we need to consume for better health. And what makes it so hard is that this food type has been around for so many generations. And it's hard to understand that how is it that our ancestors were consuming this food, but today when we consume it, it's causing so much of havoc. And much of it is because of what has transpired over the years and how it has been altered and modified in terms of changing its entire molecular structure to cause all these adverse health outcomes. Hello and welcome to my channel. If you're new to my channel, I'm talking all about navigating wellness from a mind, body, and soul perspective. In this video, I want to deep dive into the dairy industry. I think it's an area where so many people are just not aware of what the consequences are of consuming conventional dairy. And unfortunately, there's so much of changes that have taken place from the time when your ancestors were consuming this food to what we are consuming. Because we are consuming something that has been altered in such a way that it's no longer the same constitution as what your ancestors were consuming. And that is why so many people are suffering from adverse health outcomes. And part of this video is to try and help inform you of some of the things that I've come across. In no way am I the authority in terms of the space, but I'm going to try and share with you as much of the research that I've uncovered, because I've gone through a lot of trial and error when it comes to learning a lot about the effects that certain foods are having on our well-being as well as our overall health. Now, I've suffered from chronic conditions. I talk a lot about chronic acid reflux, and dairy is something which has had quite a negative effect in terms of my chronic acid reflux. However, another area that I've also suffered from is chronic acne that was really bad when I was growing up. And I always tried to look for solutions. I tried to exercise. I tried a lot of the conventional wisdom was you got to try and get much more exercise. You got to maybe consume a bit more fruit, but maintaining your existing diet. Maybe it's just your hormones that are acting up, or perhaps you're going through puberty and that's why you're getting a lot of acne. And when we end up going to specialists such as dermatologists, all they do is they prescribe these hormone suppressants to try and address the symptoms rather than the underlying cause of it. So when we look at a lot of these medications that we end up taking, they often have any side effects that can worsen other chronic conditions because you're not addressing the root cause. And I never realized at that time the significant effect that dairy was having on a lot of these acne symptoms, and why poor skin is often linked to the consumption of dairy, because dairy is no longer the same as the dairy that your ancestors were consuming. And I'm going to go through a lot of that in this video to hopefully help share with you some of what I've learned and why I now think dairy is something that I should just avoid at all costs. So I'm going to break this down into 5 areas, because I think looking at it from these 5 areas will hopefully help share the perspective that I've come across when it comes to dairy. The other thing to be mindful of when it comes to dairy is it's not just the milk that you're consuming. Dairy is found in so many products, and I know right now there's quite a big trend in the vegan movement, and some people may be thinking it's a health trend or health fad, but really it's about understanding why milk and dairy is having such a negative effect on our health and contributing to so many of the chronic conditions that people are suffering with today. So let's get into the first piece. The first piece that I want to talk about is this pasteurization aspect. Now, pasteurization is basically the heating of it to kill off any germs or bacteria and ensure that it's safe for our consumption. However, if we think about it, a lot of our ancestors are consuming raw dairy. And the problem with pasteurization is it ends up killing off the helpful enzymes that are needed in order to help us digest dairy and allow our body to assimilate a lot of the nutrients within the dairy itself. Now I want to draw upon an analogy to help you think about this from a slightly different perspective. When we think about a baby that is consuming breast milk, or we think about a calf that is consuming milk from its mother, that milk doesn't go under any pasteurization process. So all the enzymes and everything is intact. The baby is able to assimilate a lot of the nutrition because that milk hasn't been heated and destroyed or changed in its molecular structure. The problem with the whole pasteurization process is it destroys these enzymes and it actually changes the molecular structure of milk, because that heating process does something to the milk that changes its constitution and makes it less digestible to the human body, as well as causing a lot of inflammatory reactions in our body, because the body just doesn't digest it as well anymore. A lot of people suffering from lactose intolerance because there's no more lactase within the milk to help you digest it. So there's often a trend today to go towards lactose-free milk, but it's not really addressing the underlying root problem. And you're not really getting any benefits if all the beneficial aspects are being destroyed through the pasteurization process. So this is something to be really mindful of, because even if you're consuming organic milk, it's probably being pasteurized and it's still not having any of the beneficial effects that we should be getting from milk. The second aspect that I want to get into is the mucus production. Now, many may find that when you consume dairy, you end up with a lot of mucus, and this mucus is probably making you feel really sick, but you're wondering, well, maybe it's dairy that's producing mucus, so I just don't need to eat that much of it. But what we really need to do over here is to take a different perspective. Ask the question, why does the body produce mucus? Now, the answer to this question, in most cases, the body produces mucus because it's a protective mechanism of the body to try and protect us from a lot of these foreign particles or toxins that are causing havoc on our digestive system or within our body. So the body produces this mucus layer to help protect us from it. Now, when we consume something that is causing intestinal inflammation, it's not digesting, there's a high probability that your body is now reacting to it with this excessive mucus production to protect you from it, because you're consuming something that should not have been consumed. It's not being assimilated in the body. It's causing this slow inflammation or chronic inflammation in your body that is leading to a lot of the chronic conditions that people are suffering with. So if we think about people suffering from joint pain, people suffering from high cholesterol levels, it's all linked to the slow inflammation, and we misinterpret the mucus production as being, oh, it's just because the milk is very mucousy, or it's clogging up with the mucus in our body to make it more thick. But it's looking at it from a different perspective, trying to understand why does the body really produce mucus in the first place, and maybe because these foods that we are consuming are actually not being digested by the body and turning into toxins, and the body is trying to protect us against these toxins, and that's why we end up producing so much of mucus. So it's shifting perspective to understand how the body is reacting to the slow inflammation that is taking place because we are consuming dairy. And the problem is, like I said, dairy is everywhere, from ice creams to a lot of the baked goods that we're consuming. A lot of these ingredients have dairy in it, and because it's masked in these ingredients and we don't see it as milk, doesn't mean that it's not having a similar chronic inflammatory effect on our bodies. Let's go into the next item. The next item is the hormone disruption. Now, hormone disruption, because milk contains a lot of natural hormones as well as the hormones that a lot of these animals are pumped with. So the natural hormones would be like estrogen. The other hormones that are a lot of the cows are being pumped with is like the growth hormones and the antibiotics that they are given. And all this is to be able to ensure that these cows produce a lot of milk, that from an industrialization perspective they are profitable, but it's not really with the goal of ensuring that our health is placed at the forefront. It's more so to ensure that they reach their profit goals and maximum production of milk, and that it's not susceptible to perhaps some of the contamination that may take place because it's been so industrialized and produced in that manner. However, when a cow is injected with all these chemicals, hormones, whatever the cow is consuming is ending up within the milk, and we are consuming that. So we, in essence, are basically consuming those same antibiotics and the same hormone disruptors. And that's why a lot of people end up with acne and with all sorts of other chronic conditions, because of all the disruption that is taking place within our bodies. And that is something that I had to learn the hard way, because I used to love to consume dairy products as a child, and many of us do. Who doesn't love ice cream? Who doesn't love all those delicious meals that are cooked with dairy as one of the ingredients? So this is something that we really need to understand, that whatever the cow is consuming, you are consuming. Whatever the cow is being injected with, you are being injected with when you consume dairy. And this was something that I really needed to recognize, because that is why a lot of the dairy that we are consuming is having such a toxic effect on our bodies, and why it leaches within our body. And something else that we need to consider is the leaky gut connection to it, because if the body is not able to digest it and it's turning toxic within our body and leaching into our bloodstream and causing all of this, and the body is trying to cope with this through releasing it and trying to expel it, and it's expelling it out via acne and those sort of things to try and really get rid of all this toxicity. And we wonder, why is it that I'm getting acne? Acne is because of the body's coping mechanism to try and get rid of the toxins from your body. It's your natural mechanism to protect you. So because of the toxicity within our body, that is the reason why the body starts creating these acne symptoms to try and expel it. So once we try and understand it from that perspective, we can recognize that what I'm consuming is really toxic, rather than trying to look for almost band-aid solutions to try and solve this problem. Let's get into the fourth aspect, and probably a very critical component, which is the casein content. So what is casein? Casein is a primary protein that is found in a lot of the dairy products that we are consuming. Now there's two types of casein. There's the A2 casein, which is the much more natural form of casein, and then there's the A1 casein, which has the version that much of the conventional dairy out there today contains, because this is the version that has been altered because of selective breeding, gene modification, and all these sorts of mutations that has resulted in A1 casein becoming the predominant form of casein found in dairy today. Now many may be thinking, well, I need to consume my whey protein in order to bulk up on my muscles and be nice and well built, and I need the protein content of dairy. But what we're not realizing is the toxic effects that this is having on us. Now, you're starting to find more and more of the A2 casein milk out there today. However, as I mentioned previously, there's still the concerns about the pasteurization and whether it's organic or not when it comes to A2 casein. But when it comes to A1 casein, the health effects are much more adverse relative to the A2 casein. Like I said, it's because of the selective breeding and gene modifications that has resulted in this A1 casein becoming the primary casein that is contained within dairy. And what is that having on our health? What is the impact that it's having on our health? So one of the main things to understand about A1 casein, because it's so modified and it's away from its more natural form, it's not breaking down well in our bodies. And here's the surprising part, and probably the punchline that everyone needs to be aware of, because this part blew my mind as well, is that casein is actually breaking down in our body into something called beta-casomorphin, which is an opioid-like substance. And I don't need to go down the rabbit hole of the really adverse effects that opioid has been having on people's health. But even if we are microdosing on something that is opioid-like, then you can just imagine what disastrous effect this is having on our health and why it's resulting in so many people experiencing chronic conditions. Because I think this is probably a key factor contributing to a lot of people who are suffering from neurological conditions, depression, autism, all sorts of neurological conditions that are linked to perhaps consuming this opioid-like substance. Because that's essentially what this A1 protein is actually breaking down within our body as. And it's causing all these inflammatory responses within our body, the leaky gut, the poor digestion. I think this is probably one of the key factors that is really impeding our health today. And something that we need to be very mindful of, because if our body is not really able to recognize and assimilate this substance well, you can just imagine the amount of toxicity that we are really putting into our bodies. And that is why dairy is having such a negative effect on so many people's health. And it's much more of us becoming more aware of the impacts of consuming this. Because we don't get an immediate reaction, it's really important to start maintaining a food diary and putting conscious awareness to what we are consuming and the effects that it's having on our health. If I strip it out from my diet, am I experiencing slighter, better health outcomes, or is it making a drastic health outcome? So start to become more mindful of what you're consuming and the effects that it's having on your health. Because I know and I recognize that so many people are addicted to a lot of the foods that do contain dairy, because it becomes such a common part of people's diet and it's so addictive. Like, think about ice cream, think about the baked goods that contain butter and dairy within these products and make them have that taste. However, fortunately today there are more options that are dairy free. However, it takes quite a lot of effort and you may not get it everywhere. And so we need to be really mindful about what we're consuming, because there's quite a great disconnect in terms of us really understanding how food ends up at the store and what takes place in that background. Because all that we see is this nicely packaged foods with all this marketing telling us about how it's going to make you have strong, healthy bones or big muscles. And we get deceived by this marketing and we fall into the trap thinking that it's good for our health. I know so many people who are consuming things like yogurt, kefir, thinking, well, it's dairy, it's been, it has probiotic content, it's got to be good for my health. However, we're not realizing that dairy still has that same casein content. It still has that same A1 casein. It's still breaking down into this opioid-like substance, and it's still causing us to suffer all these debilitating health outcomes. So this is something we need to be really mindful of. And let's get into the fifth and final component, and that is the spiritual component. And I think this is really important and probably a reason why many of the people who fall on the ethical side generally tend to avoid dairy. But when we think about the spiritual component, we need to be thinking about it from an energy perspective, emotional perspective. If you think about a human, if a human was tortured, like, let's look at the analogy. If you have a mother of a child who is breastfeeding her child and you torture this mother, and the emotional footprint of that effect of that torture is essentially what is going into the baby when the baby is consuming the breast milk. It's that same energy that is going to be contained within the milk that is feeding the child. So similarly, when we're consuming milk from cows that have gone through this industrialization of via the dairy industry, and they're being tortured and put in under really cruel circumstances, artificially inseminated, given growth hormones and things to stimulate the production of milk, separated from their calves, undergoing so much of cruelty in order to increase the milk production. Those emotions, these animals feel emotions. Your dog or your cat feels emotions when you hurt the animal. So similarly, the cow is feeling these emotions as well, and that gets sent into the milk that we are consuming. So that energy, that vibration, that frequency, if you want to think about it in that way, is in essence going into the milk. And when it goes through this processing, it's still that same energy. We don't see what is taking place in the background. We just see the nice packaging in the store and think that this is why this product looks good. It has all this marketing to make us think it's good for us. It tastes good. However, we are unconscious of the energy that is contained within it, and something that we need to start becoming more mindful of if we are to strive for better health. And so there you go. If any of this content resonates with you, please do like, share, and subscribe. Leave your comments in the comment section below. I hope this information has really been helpful in terms of helping you make much more informed decisions when it comes to the consumption of dairy and why it's resulting in so many people experiencing so many adverse health outcomes, because we're consuming foods that are actually taking away from our health and vitality, moving us further and further away from it, disconnecting us spiritually as well, and why it's something that more people need to become more aware of. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.